I wanted to make this short video to go over some of the beliefs, goals, and initiatives that drive Project Babbage into the future. To begin, there needs to be support for core blockchain technologies and interfaces at the system level on all major platforms. What this means is that when you're using a Windows computer, a Mac, a Linux device, iOS or Android devices, at the systems level, applications need to be able to plug into a way to create Bitcoin transactions and facilitate access to tokenized assets on the blockchain. I think this is the only way going forward that we're going to achieve a world where application developers can create things with no friction and without the need to onboard people unnecessarily into application-specific ways of doing things, when in reality, these types of interactions should happen at the system level. So by advocating systems level integrations for platform-specific things such as, creating Bitcoin transactions and allowing applications to plug into that type of functionality, we can reduce the friction long-term for developers. Next, apps need to be able to create, redeem, look up, and share UTXOs seamlessly across devices, and there needs to be real-time support for non-final updating and state changes. This means that as time goes on, apps need a way to interact with the blockchain and actually consume and create tokenized assets, interacting in ways defined by various protocols that get created on top of the blockchain. Apps need a way to facilitate this type of interaction in a way that is standard and that works all the time. No matter what device a user is using, the transaction outputs that the app is dealing with need to stay in sync, and this includes non-final outputs and non-final state for transactions in, for example, payment channels and other live use cases where we haven't registered things on the blockchain yet. This means there needs to be a set of services at the device and operating system level that facilitate this type of synchronization. Next, services need to emerge that accept payments for content storage, UTXO backup, cross-device synchronization, push notifications when updates occur, and identity certificates. So this means that as apps get built, there needs to be a way for services to monetize that facilitate their operation. As apps start to utilize tokenization and create outputs in Bitcoin UTXOs, as they start to want to share those and know about when they update to facilitate changes in state, let the user know about these things, apps are going to need to be able to have access to this data, and the way that that happens is when app developers actually pay small amounts to service providers that make this type of data available. Next, accounts should be set up at device setup. Permissions management should be seamless and familiar, and balance management needs to be intuitive and simple. Keys need to be managed in hardware. So I think going forward, we're not going to have backup phrases and 12 words that you write down when you set up your device, or especially even just a new app. I think you need to be able to have hardware-based key management, meaning that only with permission from the user and the underlying device, the firmware, the operating system, and on up from there, can certain operations be performed with user-held keys. So devices are going to manage keys in hardware, and everything gets set up when the device gets set up. So a user gets a new device, they log in or they establish their keys, they establish kind of their identity on that device in that context, and then applications can plug into that. They can plug into it for things like permissions management. So when an application wants to access a new protocol or a new piece of data that they haven't had access to before, the user will be prompted by the underlying system, the operating system, the device, to grant access to that new data. and that process is seamless to the application and intuitive for the user. Same with things like balance management. When a device has money on it for something like micropayments, number one, that money needs to synchronize across all of a user's devices, and number two, it needs to synchronize across all of a user's applications. And that makes it a lot easier to facilitate things like balance management, where users can, for example, put $10 on their balance and then know they're good across all their different apps and devices for the next month. That can facilitate a micropayment-powered economy, but only when apps get together and facilitate a shared experience for balance management that works across platforms. Next, encryption, signatures, certificates, and tokens need to be natural extensions of the user's identity, enabling apps to easily define new protocols that use them. This means that as a user moves through the sea of apps and services they use every day, they actually interact in standard ways that are supported by different protocols. And those protocols can do things like encrypt user data, facilitate the creation of digital signatures that attest to the validity of documents, enable the creation of digital certificates that enable access to identity attributes and facilitate user identity management. And all of these things, including digital asset management with tokens, need to be facilitated in a way that makes sense for the user. It needs to be standard, it needs to be simple, it needs to be intuitive, and it needs to be defined in such a way that different applications, even when they compete with one another, can plug into a shared user experience. So that when a user acts in one application, when they encrypt something, when they sign something, that signature or that piece of data is available and reflected in all of the applications the user uses, because the signature or the encryption operation or the identity certificate or the digital asset, the token being managed, has been incorporated into a shared view of state that is interpreted and updated within various overlay networks used by different applications. What this means is that when I change my address, I change it once and then it's updated everywhere. When I access a piece of information in one application and make an update to it and send it off to somebody, if that person is using another application, they still get to see the information because I shared it with them. When we have standard interfaces around user identity, tokenization, signatures, encryption, and all of these different things, it facilitates a world where users' intentions are respected and their time is saved no matter what applications they're using, because their data is governed by standard protocols that everybody plugs into. Finally, all these things need to be tightly integrated into our devices and digital environments so that developers and users can adopt them without unnecessary friction. What this means is that when you go to build an application, you don't need to think about all these underlying infrastructure components, how to manage tokens, how to deal with user keys, how to facilitate permissioning, how to ensure that data is secure when it gets encrypted and exchanged. When these things, which are really bedrock principles of what facilitates a peer-to-peer internet on top of Bitcoin, are defined in a standard way, it makes it so that as time goes on, people are able to interact and see the value in this technology. They're able to create an ecosystem where those that use this system are able to benefit from the things that it provides, while those that don't can see clear advantages by moving over to the new model. If you're on board with making this stuff happen and helping build the future, I'd recommend following our social media platforms and staying informed, getting involved, communicating with other developers and the people around you to let them know why you think this technology is valuable. Thank you for being a part of the future and building on top of a better internet.